Slavery has been one of the biggest parts of history, and Robert Smalls is a good example of someone who came out on the better side of it. This is an important topic for people to be educated about because it affected so many for so long in a very negative way. I've done a lot of research as well as have some background knowledge about slavery and racism, so I have a good knowledge of the topic. Slavery is a negative way of life that some people were fortunately able to escape. I'll start with his life during slavery, move on to how he escaped, and then end with his life after slavery. Life during slavery is one of the hardest things someone can possibly go through in life. Robert Smalls was born on April 5th, 1839 in Beaufort, South Carolina. He was a slave for the McKee family, and he lived with his mother in a small cabin behind the main house. He was a slave until he was about 12 years old, and then when the family moved to Charleston, he went along with them to do bigger work, which included being a waiter, a ship rigger, and a sailor. All of the earnings that Robert made went to Mr. McKee. According to Little John in 2018, some experiences that slaves had included whips and chains, limited food, no pay, long hours, and more. In Gula Statement, Robert Smalls from Slavery to Congress, 1839 to 1915, by Anthony Chesebro, it is explained that Robert was a good worker, but he didn't follow the rules very well, such as curfews that were set for the black people. He eventually got married to Hannah Jones, an enslaved hotel maid who already had a daughter and lived in Charleston as well. Small and Jones had a daughter and son together, but unfortunately the son, Robert Jr., passed away not too long after his birth due to smallpox. After the passing of Small's son, he tried to buy himself and his family out of slavery, but the attempt failed. When Smalls was later hired as a deckhand after the outbreak of the Civil War, he was able to learn a lot of information about navigating a ship and began plotting a plan to escape. It took several months for Smalls to learn the information he did in order to get the most he could without raising any suspicion from anybody. Once Smalls felt he knew enough information, he began his escape. On May 13th, 1862, Smalls took his family, along with other men, women, and children, to escape, while the crew and white officers were sleeping one night. Smalls was able to use the knowledge he gained over the past couple of months to navigate the ship, as well as stayed prepared in case of attack. The crew had a Confederate flag they posted right before another ship fired at them, which then caused the ship to surrender their weapons and the crew was able to get a hold of them. In Bernard Powers Jr.'s Yearning to Breathe Free, Robert Smalls of South Carolina and his family in 2008 discussed the escape of how the crew had so many weapons. The ship had just been loaded with cannons and ammo, so they had protection in case of attack. With some things he learned, Smalls figured out some of the captain's body language and wore a straw hat that the captain wore regularly while sailing the ship, as well as found a uniform to help disguise him so that his family and the rest of his crewmates would be safe, and the people at checkpoints didn't question Smalls when he was passing through. Smalls and his crew and family made their way to the Union, where they became free people. Their story was published in articles, and they were all awarded money for bringing the ship full of ammo and cannons. Smalls then joined the force to fight against the Confederacy as well as slavery. Smalls was in the Navy/Army for a few years while trying to convince Abraham Lincoln to let black people fight in the Union. After the war ended, Smalls used his military retirement as well as saved prize money, which was around $1,500, which is a lot back in that day, to buy a home in his hometown, which happened to be the house of his former master McKee. Shapiro, 1971, included that Smalls first learned to read and write when he got back to South Carolina, Beaufort, and later opened a small little convenience store, a newspaper called the Southern Standard, as well as a school for black children. After educating himself and starting these businesses, Robert Smalls went on to join the anti-slave Republican Party and was soon elected into the State House of Representatives, where he fought for the rights of African Americans and served 5 terms in Congress. When you see a black man or woman, whether you are friends with them or not, keep in mind the struggles that they that they have gone through to get where they are today. Even if they have not been personally affected, chances are it affected their relatives almost 100%. Small's wife Hannah passed away in 1883. Robert remarried in 1890 and had another child, and after he remarried, Small served as a U.S. Customs collector and stayed involved with politics. He did this from 1889 to 1911. Robert later died in 1915 due to diabetes and malaria. His life was long-lived and he influenced many. Life for Smalls may not have been the best overall, but he was successful in most things he did. Robert Smalls was a hero that opened many opportunities for many people. The negative life of slavery didn't bring Smalls down. In fact, it encouraged him and lifted him to do better things in the tasks he set his mind to and the things he was passionate about. Slavery and racism is still around in different forms today. However, all of the people like Smalls helped to improve it in more ways than one. It led many African Americans to opportunities that they never would have thought to have.